I was at a wedding last weekend. It was a beautiful, expensive wedding on a Saturday afternoon. A young guy from my neighborhood was standing at the front of the room. He was reading his promises to his new wife. He talked about destiny. He talked about finding his soulmate. He talked about burning passion and fireworks that would never, ever fade. I sat near the back of that beautifully decorated room. I watched him from behind rows of smiling people. I clapped quietly with the rest of the guests. And I felt absolutely nothing. Nothing but a heavy, exhausting kind of pity. I was not being negative. I was not trying to be a bad person. I felt pity because I know exactly what happens when the fireworks stop. I know what happens when the destiny fades. It fades into endless arguments and heavy silence. It fades into two exhausted people living in the same apartment like strangers. I know this because I almost destroyed my entire life waiting for a fire that was never coming. Let me tell you about my marriage. Let me tell you what a completely ordinary life looks like from the inside. Her name was Sarah. We didn't fall in love at first sight. Nothing about it was dramatic. We met through a mutual friend. We went on a few ordinary dates, and we simply stayed together. There was no racing heartbeat. There was only safety and comfort. By the time I turned 28, it is an age to grow up. It is an age to take on real responsibilities. It seemed like everyone around me was getting married. Everyone was buying apartments and starting families. I was terrified of being left behind, terrified of being the weird one. I did not want to be the single guy still waiting for the ideal girl. So I followed the rules. I followed the expectations. I did what I was supposed to do. She was kind. She was reliable. She was a safe choice. It just made sense. So we got married. It wasn't glamorous. We booked an ordinary hotel and invited our families. We read simple promises to each other. I remember standing there in my suit. I looked at her and I felt a quiet, heavy relief. The pressure was gone. The box was checked. I had finally fulfilled the greatest obligation of my life. And then, the disappointment started to creep in. It did not happen immediately. It happened slowly. So slowly, I did not even notice it was happening. Instead of a movie romance, we settled into an endless, exhausting cycle of resentment. We fought over everything and nothing. She grew upset because she felt like she was drowning in housework. She felt she was carrying the entire family on her shoulders while I was never home. I grew defensive because she never seemed to understand how exhausting my night shifts were. When our first son was born, the noise and the stress doubled. 2 years later, when our daughter arrived, the sheer exhaustion almost broke us. We raised our voices over the endless laundry. We fought over the unpaid bills. We felt the suffocating pressure of a life we hadn't planned for. It became a never-ending loop of small, miserable complaints. But the worst part was not the shouting. It was the silence that came after. One day, the arguments just stopped, and nothing filled the space they left behind. Our conversations became transactions. Buy milk. Pick up the kids. Did you pay the bill? No warmth. No curiosity. No reason to stay in the same room longer than we had to. We were no longer lovers. Just two exhausted people sharing an apartment and a bank account. I drive a taxi for a living. I leave home before the sun goes down. By the time I finally unlock the door, it is long after midnight. The kids are already asleep. Sarah is asleep. The apartment is dark and quiet. It feels like no one lives there. I get into bed beside a woman who doesn't even know I'm home. For more than 10 years, that has been exactly my life. I drive strangers through the city at night. I hear their calls, their arguments, their laughter. I watch drunk couples kissing in the back seat. I pick up young men from expensive restaurants. I drop off old women at hospitals. The city is alive, but I sit behind the wheel, alone, watching it all pass by. Some nights I stopped at a red light and watched couples leave the bars. They held hands. They leaned into each other. They laughed about something stupid. And I felt a deep bitterness rising in my chest. I thought, that should be me. That warmth, that closeness, that easy burning connection, I deserved that. But I was stuck in a cab. I was earning money and paying the mortgage. Meanwhile, the woman I married was already asleep. She was in a bed that felt more like an arrangement than a home. I started to blame her. Not out loud. Never out loud. The blaming lived inside my own head. That is the most dangerous place for it to live because no one can argue back. I told myself she was boring. I told myself she had no passion, no fire. She had no desire to make our life anything more than a long, gray checklist. Somewhere out there, on one of the thousands of streets I drove every night, I was sure a different life was waiting for me. A life with color, a life with heat, a life where someone actually looked at me when I walked through the door. I spent years building this story in my head. I collected new evidence every single day. Every cold shoulder became proof. Every silent dinner became proof. Every time I spoke, and she barely looked up, became proof. Every weekend we lived in separate rooms. I saved them all. Like a man collecting receipts for a refund he planned to demand. And the conclusion was always the same. I deserved better. This was not the life I imagined for myself. I was ready to throw it all away. I had the speech prepared in my head. I was just waiting for the right argument, the right excuse to pack a bag and walk out the door. But I never walked out that door, because before I could make the biggest mistake of my life, my 8-year-old son woke me up. It was an ordinary rainy Sunday afternoon. We were sitting on the sofa, me on one end, Sarah on the other. Our older son was squeezed in the middle. His little sister was taking a nap in the bedroom. We were watching an animated movie, you know the kind, where the prince finally finds his princess. When the movie ended, my son suddenly turned to me. He looked at me with his big, serious eyes and asked, "Dad, do you and Mom love each other? Like that?" I froze. The question hit me like a punch. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What was I supposed to say? The truth I had carried in my head for years was no. We are just two tired people stuck together. Roommates splitting the bills. But I looked at his face. He was 8 years old. He was staring up at me with those wide, trusting eyes. He was waiting for me to tell him that his family was real, that his home was built on something solid. I could not break his heart. So I turned the question around. "What do you think?" I asked him. "Do you think Mom and Dad love each other?" He tilted his head to one side, the way kids do when they are thinking hard about something simple. Then he smiled. "Of course you do," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "How do you know?" I asked. He thought about it for a second. Then he held up one finger. "Because every time Mom makes pasta, you eat 3 plates. You always say you are not hungry, but then you eat 3 plates. He held up a second finger. "And every night when you work late, Mom leaves the little light on in the hallway. She told me it is easier to come home when there's a light waiting." He smiled when he said that last part, like it was cute, like it was a funny secret. I did not smile. I sat there and looked at my son. And something inside me gave way. Something I had kept locked for 15 years. Easier to come home? I had forgotten I ever said that. 15 years ago, after a night shift, I mentioned that walking into a dark apartment made it feel empty. I didn't think it mattered. I forgot. But she built a habit around it. For over a decade, no matter how badly we argued, no matter how many cold, silent days stretched between us, she left that hallway light on, every single night. She never mentioned it. She never said, "I left the light on for you." She just did it, quietly, like breathing without thinking about it. And the pasta, I suddenly realized something about that too. She only made it on Fridays. She never announced it. She never said, "I made your favorite tonight." She just put it on the table, sat down, and started eating. And I had eaten 3 plates every single Friday, without once stopping to think about why it tasted so good, or why it only appeared at the end of the week, or why she always made sure there was enough for 3 plates. I looked across the sofa at Sarah. She was not watching me. She was half watching the television while scrolling through her phone. Her face was lit up by the blue glow of the screen. She had no idea what our son had just said. She had no idea what was happening inside me. I looked at her hands. They were not the soft hands I married. They were rough, dry, cracked along the knuckles. From years of washing dishes, scrubbing floors, and carrying grocery bags up 5 flights of stairs, the thin lines around her eyes had deepened. Her shoulders curved forward. Tired from holding up a life I had never once helped her carry, and my eyes started to burn. What had I been looking for? What had I spent 15 years waiting for? Some grand explosion of passion? Some fire that lights up the sky, makes your heart race and your hands tremble? I already had fire. I had fire every Friday night in a plate of pasta, a dinner she never once asked me to thank her for. I had fire in a hallway light, a light that stayed on silently and faithfully, for a man who had forgotten he ever complained about the dark. She never said, "I love you," in a way I recognized. She said it in the only language she knew. In hallway lights and Friday dinners, in clean towels and a warm jacket hung by the door on cold mornings. And I had been so busy looking for fireworks, I completely missed the fire already burning, right here, in this ordinary apartment, on this ordinary Sunday afternoon. I did not say anything. I just reached across the sofa, past my son, and put my hand on top of hers. She looked up, surprised, a little confused. I could see the question forming behind her eyes. What is wrong? Nothing was wrong. For the first time in 15 years, nothing was wrong. That was 6 months ago. Our life has not changed. I still drive the night shift. I still come home to a dark apartment. We still argue over the little things. She still rolls her eyes when I forget to take out the trash. Nothing dramatic has happened. There was no big conversation, no tearful apology, no Hollywood moment where we fell in love all over again. We are still us. Ordinary, quiet, familiar. But now, every night when I come home late, when I see that little hallway light glowing in the darkness, I always feel peaceful and grounded, because I know that inside this quiet apartment, there is someone who is always waiting for me. I no longer want fireworks, passion, drama, a love story that looks good on a movie screen. I used to ache for all of that. Now, I want the hallway light. I want the Friday pasta. I want the quiet, stubborn kindness of a woman who remembers things about me that I have forgotten about myself. That is why, sitting in the back of that wedding last weekend, I wanted to walk right up to that young groom. I wanted to put my hand on his shoulder and tell him, the fire you are chasing right now will burn out. It always does. But if you are lucky, you will come home one night and find a small light left on for you in the darkness. Do not just walk past it. That is so much more than a light. That is someone refusing to give up on you long after you had given up on them. I almost threw that love away because it was too quiet for me to hear. I spent 15 years looking out the window for fireworks. I was completely blind to the steady flame keeping my house warm. Do not make the same mistake. If you have someone who stays, even through the shouting, even through the silence, even when you have given them every reason to leave, do not let go. I know the days feel gray. I know you sometimes look at them across the dinner table and wonder if this is really all there is. It is. And it is more than enough. Look at them. Really look. Not at what they say, but at what they do. At what they have been quietly doing while you were too busy looking out of the window for something louder. The love you are searching for is probably already glowing in your hallway, waiting for you to finally notice. It does not look like the movies. It looks like coming home. If you like this story, please subscribe and share.